Hi
Hello, Irit.
there.
How are you?
I'm good, Anil. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you
Eh,
so much for taking time to be part of this podcast.
of course, my pleasure. Let's get started and you can ask me all the questions you want.
We want to talk about one of the most important topic when it comes to customer success is customer adoption. I just want to understand your perspective from, I've seen a lot of people when they have this confusion or different mindset when we talk about customer onboarding and customer adoption. And I've seen that the way people look at it is in a different way. Some people look at it as one whole thing, but some have a different perspective of looking at as two different entities. For example, the way I look at it is customer onboarding is more about making your customer familiarize with your product. But adoption is, it's a state for making your customers move from being just a user, making your product an integral part of their customer journey that helps them achieve their core objectives. So that's where how I look at customer onboarding versus customer adoption.
Mhm.
Your thoughts, what do you think?
I think that onboarding is phase one of your adoption journey. And effectively, if you were to be great at adoption, you're going to have onboarding on repeat all the time. To some degree, like maybe it's a lighter onboarding, but you should be prepared to
Mhm.
continuously re-engage your customer and have the what's next step for them
Mhm.
already in mind as soon as they finish onboarding. So there's two ways to approach this. You could say adoption is whatever they bought, I want to make sure that they use. And then you can even take it to the next level. Adoption plus is, yes, of course, want to have them use everything we implemented, but
Yeah.
also I want to make sure that they always know what else can they use or how else can they use my application or software solution or services, so
Mhm.
that we always talk about the next step, the next bucket. That's always top of mind. And I think that's where the weakest link is for most SaaS companies. They
Mhm.
basically finish implementation, we set you up, we taught you a few things,
You're
the
on your
rest
own.
is PLG, like product-led growth. And I
Mhm.
don't think that that's working for anybody unless even within your product, you have this journey mindset where when you think about customer health score, you're thinking, do they have a clear next step? Yes or no? If the answer is no, your customers is on the road to churn, whether you know
Mhm.
it or not. It might
Yeah.
not take them a day, it might take them a year or two, but effectively, they're on that slippery
Absolutely.
slope.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to dwell a bit deeper when you said that, and especially about the SaaS industry, they don't understand the importance of this particular step when you talk about product adoption. Can you dive a bit more into this core problem that SaaS industries have, where they don't make this as an important step, or they don't see this as an important step in the entire customer journey?
I think it's just a strategy that I don't see a lot of SaaS companies or software companies put an
Mhm.
emphasis on. They put an emphasis on making sure the onboarding is great or
Uh-huh.
smooth, or that the implementation is smooth, or maybe the cost to serve for implementation is low. And then once the implementation is over, they might have some great processes around handover to the CS team or account manager or whomever, or maybe they don't have a handover at all if it's like an older company. It's just, okay, implementation is over, activation is done. Am I supposed to be doing something? I'm giving them great support. So at that moment, I wouldn't say all of them, but some or most SaaS companies or software companies have this
Mhm.
black hole where there's no proactive interaction with customers because the implementation is over. They went live. It was a success. 2 thumbs up, meaning it works. We delivered per the SOW, whatever it is. And then now there's this black hole. Nobody owns the conversation with the customer between when the onboarding is finished to when the renewal conversation starts. If they're a little better, they actually have a CS team. And those CS teams talk, if you don't have that strategy for adoption plus, expand
Yeah.
adoption, the
Yeah.
CS team is just there to make sure that whatever the implementation included is being used. And if the customer has a question, they answer. but they don't have a path to walk customers to what else, Mr. Customer? How else can we partner with you? How else can we elevate the relationship? What other business outcomes do you have? And here's a path on how to get there. There's usually nothing there like that. If anybody here is listening to this episode, you actually do have that to some degree. Kudos for you. But if you don't, then just know that you're one of many. This is not very common. And I think the big mistake that companies do is they think that customer success is about setting up a customer success team. And I believe setting up a true, mature customer success is about setting up a strategy where we have more control over the customer journey to the degree that we constantly are there to help the customer materialize what is their next step. How can they improve on being a better partner with us? Don't have those tools, you're not having a very powerful strategy around customer success. You're in like basic level.
Yeah, and that's where there's a lot of talks that's happening, and I've seen a lot of discussions happening around this customer success, where we still have this problem of executives not taking customer success seriously. They still have this notion of customer success still being a cost center rather than a profit center. And that's one of the discussions are, even in LinkedIn, I've seen a lot of posts that talks about this particular core concern that exists in today's business world. And there's not much happening. Why do you feel that it's still taking time for companies or organization to understand the core importance of customer success in their organization?
I think a lot of times it's about what I don't know that I don't know on the management team. Their perception, like I said, of a customer success team is just to set one up so that we can increase engagement, but they don't have good strategies around increasing value. And secondly, I think, unfortunately, I would have to say the executives that get promoted to own that strategy, whether it's the CCO, VP of customer success, the director, whomever heads that notion, don't necessarily do a good job in articulating the ROI of customer success. They're still not mature enough from a business standpoint to know and to select and to prove the correct KPIs. And they still think that if they set up a churn playbook, that people would applaud them because they've done something. Or if they set up a new video library with how-to videos, that management would be happy. Management would only be happy if you set up the video and you could show that it had an impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely. Speak the language of the executives. That's the only way.
So if you don't know how to speak the language of the executives, or you don't pick the right KPIs, you're going to be in trouble. And I think that the latter problem is more predominant than the first problem, although between the two, you're going to get your customer success team canceled within 2 years' time.
I was attending this webinar by Nick Mehta and Jason, and they were talking about it's become more leaner and leaner because the cost of, as you rightly said, and everybody's looking to reduce their operating costs. And one of the core department that is getting impacted is customer success. And how looking at there's going to be a more familiar trend where customer success is more going to be inclined or put on the sales. That's another concerning thing that came out during the discussion. So that's one of the problem areas that I still feel that there's so much of noise that people like you and a lot of others are making to communicate to the businesses that how important customer success is. But somewhere that the gap still exists. And instead of reducing it, I somewhere see that the gap increasing, where the businesses start taking customer success as a serious, or how to put it, a crucial factor or key driver for sustained growth and the profitable business.
What needs to be done? That's $1 million question. Who needs to do it, first of all? If it's a founder or an executive, they get a lot of push from their mentors, from their board of directors to set up customer success and to adopt customer success. They are getting that pressure. And I think the number one mistake is that they don't take a coach to help them with that, somebody that can help them in that journey to implement it properly. They don't read the right books to even understand what does that entail. And if someone here is just getting a job as a customer success executive at a startup with like 5, 20, 30, 50 people, like a small company still, I highly recommend, actually, this is for me gold, the 7 Pillars of Customer Success by Wayne McCulloch. If I had to write a book, this would be very, very close to what I would have written. What customer success means in terms of being on the offense strategy and how much work needs to be involved in like how it impacts different teams within the organization, and that it's not enough to just set up a customer success team. So that's number one. You need to educate your ELT, your executive leadership team, around what customer success really is. And secondly, like I said, you need to put your foot in the ground, know how to paint your vision and how to quantify it properly. I had a session at Happily, which was a virtual conference set up by Ever After around the definitive plan, teaches CS executives on how to structure their annual plan so that it gets approved. And it's very clear as to what was going to be the impact if they were led to do all these different initiatives before the end of the year, and what would happen to the company and why is it critical. Learning how to talk about that and clearly articulate things is crucial for us as customer success executives to help management understand the full impact of customer success, not just on clients, but also on the business.
True. I just wanted to explore more on, you use these 2 words, defensive strategy and offensive strategy. So if you can throw some more light on these 2 areas, I mean, it'd be good for the listeners to understand what you mean by that.
No, I never played football or soccer, but watched it enough to understand that when you play defense, the other team is going to try and get more points, and you're actually probably going to lose the game. First things first, when you get the attack, you need to learn how to defense. You want to get out of that reactive mode. What happens with defense strategies is that you're in reactive. And if you ask most customer success executives, their team is in a reactive mode. What they're telling you, we have a defense and it's not even a strategy. We're just like a high school team just trying to prevent the ball from getting into the goal. And that's never a great feeling. You want to be in control. You want to be on the offense. So let's talk about what does that mean for customer success. First and foremost, the worst case scenario is where your team is getting asks from clients, they're getting bombarded with complaints, and they just try to appease all the different clients. I had a different interview when I was asked, what should the CSM number 1 goal is to be? And I was like, I talk to a lot of CSMs, and sometimes they say, I want to be a CSM because I love helping people. You want to help people, go work at a nonprofit. Helping people is very reactive, not necessarily, but that mindset. What you want to be is you want to be consultative. You want to be a mentor. You want to be a coach. You want to lead that relationship. I mean, people say, hey, I love helping people. It's like, oh, you have a problem? Let me help you. That's the worst strategy, I should say, engagement model for customer success. So if your team is in that mode, just know you're probably having more churn than you need to and less upsell than you want to, or no upsell for that reason. So when you go into offense, more and more into offense mode, the more mature your customer success is. So when you do need to get into defense, you have clear playbooks. So when a code red happens, everybody knows who needs to be alerted, consulted with, who owns it, who needs to assist. Everybody knows their position, and we all play together. And so we are able to diminish churn as it happens, but we also go into offense. If we track churn reasons and we track predominant risk reasons, we can actually see what is it that we need to do earlier in the customer journey proactively to make those instances happen less and less over time. So we don't even have to deal with them as frequently as we currently do. That's one. Secondly, like we talked about before, client finishes onboarding, they might even in control to some degree as to what use case they want to have. And we can talk about, being in offense mode around that. A long time ago, when I was implementing systems, when a client came to me and they said, well, we want this and this and this and this, and 1,000 transactions brought in from 5 years ago, and we want all of that uploaded into this new system that you're going to integrate for us, I would say, whoa, 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 time out. We're not going to do that in phase one. Let's get sliver of that, almost like designing a POC for them, but a little bit more than a POC so they can start using the systems. Let's pick features that are easy to digest mentally for your end users so that adopt quickly. Let's take sliver of the transaction. So if there's any issues, we know, what needs to even be fixed. If we do too much, it's a big bang approach. We don't want clients to take over. So even in onboarding, we can be on the offense and say, hey, these are best practices, these are not, and push back when clients want to have too big of a scope. My point is, in every phase in the client journey, whether it's during onboarding, immediately after, in year one, in year two, I have a system that I sell to 1,000 end users. You know that it's a big company and they're going to have new employees coming on board, employees leaving. And so what is our strategy around adoption? Do we offer our clients an annual program or a quarterly program that they can send all their new employees as part of their new onboarding process to learn about this system? And if not, what are we expecting that they would do it? Like, what are your biggest problems? Are you mitigating them? That's offense strategy.
I completely agree with you that most of the customer success teams are very reactive. One of the things is, as you rightly said, that there is no clear communication between the executives and the CSS team, and there is no definite structure that is put in place that the CSM team understand that, hey, the existence of my team is because for the XYZ reasons. And there is always a chaos. And when you don't have the clarity, you're absolutely in chaos. And that's the biggest thing that is happening in today's world, that, if you don't have a clarity in what you're doing on an ongoing basis, or if your executives don't tell you, this is the whole purpose of existence of the CSM team, then it is always in chaos. You always end up firefighting on a day-to-day basis. And as you rightly said, you'll always be in the defensive, which doesn't work in the basis.
No, it doesn't work. It causes bandwidth issues, employee attrition, customer dissatisfaction, higher churn, you name it. Yeah, higher cost to serve. Talk about that as a metric. Cost to serve is a very important metric. With the economies down, it's very important to focus on that. You can accomplish that not just by making the defense strategy a lot better, but also by scaling and optimizing your offense.
So when you're talking about retention, let's come back to this whole core topic of product adoption. And you mentioned that you have this framework that helps customer not only boost their retention rate, but also increase their customer lifetime value. So throw some light on that.
If your customers are only using your product for a very small thing, your product is going to get commoditized at some point and the ROI is not going to be there. So what I'm working with my clients a lot of times is on a strategy that helps them improve or increase the adoption over time. So I'm going to explain a little bit of how we do that. The main problem with adoption is like why customers don't adopt a product is because there's like perception of very poor value of what the product can do for me. And what we want is a strategy that helps the mindset of the customer to think about our product, one that has very strong ROI. When I was younger, I just left a company called Gainsight, very well known in our space. And I was talking to one of their clients, which I co-presented at one of the very first Pulse conference. We're sitting down in a coffee shop and she was saying, yeah, we implemented Gainsight, but we're not using it that much. And I was thinking, not using it that much. This was one of the most vocal advocates for Gainsight. And I said, well, why are you advocating so much? And she said, well, while we don't use it that much, I see a very strong ROI for this application. Like we should be. Once IT releases all these permissions, we should get immense value. So this is the difference. It doesn't matter so much how much value they actualize. If they don't see clear perceived value that's way higher than what's happening right now, they're
Right.
probably on their way to churn. That's not uncommon, by the way. The second thing that happens sometimes is that, okay, so even if the client does understand that there's a higher value, if we're in reactive mode, we're not going to be able to get them to realize value or increase value in an effective, scalable way that's consistent. And so what we want to develop and is an effective engagement. Oh, you want X? Here's what you need to do. And you can do it partially as self-paced, or here are the services, but really paint a very clear picture as to what is happening. And
Right.
lastly, even if you and I, the executive of the team, establish a strong ROI framework, we write down all the playbooks and a great way for clients to be aware about it, we still get sluggish results, meaning our own team doesn't adopt it and management don't get it. And what we want to do is to create a framework that not only gets adopted, but we actually see accelerated transformation and change within our own organization as well as clients. And so the first thing to get that done, we actually have multiple accelerators around each one of these drivers. One, we need to set the charter. Let's say we want to set it up so that we understand who's going to do what is the ideal customer profile that we're targeting, and then to map the outcomes. So for that cohort of clients or that persona, what are the outcomes that they want? And then set it up so that it makes sense to them. So that's from an idea standpoint, we're establishing value in a clear visual way so that we can frame those conversations with clients. The goal here is to have clients say, hey, I want that. They connect with it and they understand it. They say, hey, I want that next step that we talked about earlier in the conversation. Once they say, hey, I want that, and I'm clear on what else I can get, and we're aligned, I want to have the team be very clear around pointing the path on how to get that value.
Right.
And then ignite interest means that, well, if I don't have a QBR, how would my clients know about all these additional outcomes? I have to set up some way to elevate awareness and ignite interest. And I find that sometimes QBRs and EBRs are just not set up right. And if we have a lower cohort, most SaaS companies don't know how to do it in a scalable way, certainly not effectively. So we set all of that up for them. Once we set all of these frameworks, we actually need everybody to know where they are, who does what, and do it in a consistent manner. This is where we actually start to setting up the tools to make sure that not only everybody knows where they are, but we do it consistently and we know how to gauge for results so we can celebrate wins, not just internally, but also with clients. This is what drives loyalty, reviews, client stories on social media. We want to get maximum growth, value, and engagement levels from these different strategies so we can get the NRR as high as possible, obviously, in a scalable way. And that's the essence of this framework. If you were to implement it, not only your team is more scalable, adoption is higher, the results are higher for both non-monetary and monetary value for both you and the clients.
I just want to dig in and some of the first steps that you spoke about. And I think that's where the initial problems kick in when it comes to setting up this whole process. You spoke about setting priorities or mapping those outcomes. Do you think that, these are some of the initial phases where there's a lack of clarity that doesn't exist when you talk about customer success or customer success team? And can you dwell into more in terms of what kind of barriers do you see in this first initial phases?
First barrier is that management doesn't have a good value story. They have a single value that they sell during sales, and nobody's expanding on that value going forward. So, for example, if you are a company, I just had a conversation with the CEO. They sell actually a highly customized application. And once they customize that application for, I think like it's a bank or a manufacturer, they finish bringing that customized application and the client starts using it. And what happens is after 2, 3 years, some genius comes up with off the shelf solutions. So all the customizations that they set up doesn't mean anything. Like the client is thinking to themselves, well, why do I need this? I could just buy that thing and I don't need to
Right.
pay for all that customization. My point is that the executive leadership team sometimes doesn't have a good story around the value. And certainly they don't have a story around what happens after the initial value is delivered. And this
Yeah.
also, by the way, happens with services. I worked with this company, it's basically a reseller, a VAR. And
Okay.
their big value proposition was that, hey, we will help you during the purchasing cycle. We'll help you choose the right one, get you discounts. And so once they got the client, after 2, 3 years, the buyers that were working with them on the sales cycle might have left, executive sponsor change. And now nobody in the client's organization even knew that they ever helped them with this big purchase. And
Mhm.
they would lose the client once they stopped using that platform. They wouldn't get the
Yeah.
subscription fee anymore
Right.
and didn't have a good story for their clients to say, hey, besides helping you purchasing this, why should you be working with us when the 3 years of the contract is done? You're ready to renewal. Why should you renew with us? They were like in a stagnant mode, definitely non-growth. The other company where they had the customized solutions, after 3 years, clients would drop and never do business with them again. Not because they didn't bring about an immense service, it's just they didn't
Right.
see any ROI. And so my role in these kind of scenarios is to build a value proposition that's not just good for the first engagement or the first value delivered. See what is best in class looks like. If you're from this industry and I'm working with you, what else should you be doing with me, Mr.
Yeah.
Customer? And
Right.
visually make it very clear to them so that now I can arm my CSMs with the talk tracks and the visuals and hold them accountable to having those
Mhm.
conversations, paint a very clear ask as to when they should be interacting and with whom, so that we
Mhm.
can ignite interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to have a playbook for that.
This whole explanation triggers to another thought that, and you often see that there's a big gap between the perceived value versus the received value. Because what happens is, for example, if I'm interested in buying a product, my perceived value of that
Mm.
product or how that product is going to help me will be very different from the time that I start using the product and see that, hey, the received value that I'm going to get is something very different. So is there a mismatch? I mean, do you see that there's often mismatch in this perceived value versus received value?
I think there's two types of perceived values. I think the one you're talking about is when a customer is oversold, meaning the
Yeah.
perceived value has nothing to do with whatever you can actualize. Like it's pie in the sky, not even related to whatever we can actually deliver that somebody's sold you on.
Mhm.
And boy, you're in trouble if that helps. The perceived value that you want is going to be outlined based on what other customers have already successfully achieved with you. It's
Mhm.
not pie in the sky, it's just multiple earthly, tangible use cases that you can bring about tomorrow or within a few months out. And you've already gotten to do that with other clients potentially. Nothing that's like stretching your product, but within the product or service offering, this is
Mhm.
something that you can actually deliver, but the client might not be aware of. If the
Yeah.
client understand the full perceived value that they can literally actualize with you this or next year, that's a good gap. You actually want to stretch the gap. If the gap is the salesperson was actually talking about something that can never happen or can never happen easily, boy, you're in trouble. Or the client comes to you and say, can you do this? And now you know you need to hijack your entire R&D roadmap to make that happen. That's
Yeah.
not a good gap. The good gap is the one that we can actually come up with a path for them to actualize it fairly quickly. And what fairly quickly means in everybody's worlds is different, but we do want to get to wow moment fairly relatively within a few weeks, even if the implementation itself takes a few months.
Another important factor when we talk about product adoption is customer education. So how does customer education contribute to product adoption and the value perception?
Obviously, when you point the path should include the training or the education, if it's a self-paced one, or your certification program, or recommendations on how often do they need to brush up on their skills? What should their new employee onboarding process look like, given that launch time is happening in 2 months from now? So you might have one training done after go live, but then what are your plans for next year and the year after next, especially if there's a lot of end users? Absolutely plays a critical part, and that's part of pointing the path. Look, we have a framework for how to point the path in the best way possible, and it includes multiple aspects, and obviously training and education is one of them.
But then there's another important factor that people often ignore is measuring your performance. Now, when it comes to product adoption, what are some of the key metrics that you think that should be tracked if you want to improve your overall adoption process?
Well, it depends on what your success criteria is, obviously, and the type of adoption path that you're setting up. But I would say very basic level, how many new customers have adopted this feature function module service from the day you set up the strategy to the day you actually put it into motion? Do you see more people adopt or engage with you around that, or even raising their hand and says, yeah, I'm interested in it? You can always track to see if adoption goes down over time, so that you have risk mitigation strategies to showcase that this feature may not be sticky enough, and then think about strategies to mitigate adoption risks. I think that one other exercise that I ask my clients to do, and that's part of the health score, is that let's say we have 5 different things that we want our customers to do. Like, a good success indication is how sticky is the client for some of us. Okay, like if it's a very highly customized solution, enterprise solution, you're gonna want to have your clients integrate other systems into yours. Just makes it stickier. And so sometimes when a CEO calls me and says, hey, Irit, we have a lot of clients leaving us, and I ask them, well, what is the average number of systems integrated with yours? He says, well, the average is usually 1. I know he has a problem. And so one of the adoption strategies that we're going to set up, the success indicator is going to be, well, from 1, what it should be ideally. Is it 3? Is it 5? Like, how many systems can it actually integrate with? I don't know. Every system's different. And then what would be just an okay result? And let's see, are we able to progress to increase the average per client? So we count how many clients are opting into integrating more, but we also look at the overall average. We want to increase that. So it really depends case by case, but these are good 2 examples that might be applicable to almost anybody that's listening.
And how bigger is this product adoption issue or problem in the SaaS industries?
I think it's pretty predominant, especially if you have multiple products you got through M&A or you developed additional ones. You might have it for the overall product, or you might have it for one of the modules that you think is going to be super sticky if we get that. Sometimes it's not just for your entire solution. Sometimes it's about a specific module that you think is key because it's differentiator between you and your other competitor. I had another client that says, look, our product is super sticky, but we have one feature that is constantly being replaced by our competitor. But we can completely switch our competitor so that more of our clients are using us instead of the competitor, and make the whole family of products a lot more sticky and loyalty to the brand. And so for them, it was, how many clients can we have replace the competitor to use our existing module, especially if it's comparable? So it's not always about the entire solution, but that framework is super, super effective, super, super strong for whatever use case you want to incorporate it in.
The other thing that I also want to talk about quickly is the role of personalization. I mean, there's a lot of discussion that happens that, hey, every customer is different and you need to personalize or customize your approach in making sure that the value that the customer is looking for is received by them on an ongoing basis. So what is the role of personalization when you talk about product adoption?
I think what I'm hearing you say is that I might have a different adoption framework for different cohorts of clients or different personas, and I would absolutely agree with that. So
Yeah.
typically, when you want to develop the strategy, you would pick a cohort where that makes sense. So let's say you start not from the customer, but you would start from a module or a competitive product or whatever it is that you want to promote. You
Mhm.
would say, well, let's just pick a cohort or a persona where this makes a lot of sense for. And the reason we do that is because as we come up with these strategies, it's easier to think about a specific account or three specific accounts to kind of make sure that whatever we develop is actually real, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And
Yeah.
then you can test it out on other cohorts or other personas or say, well, this is only applicable for high touch companies that are in the finance industry. Let's now set up another framework for a different industry. You can even do that for a specific process or team or a specific persona. By the way, not every SaaS company or software companies are dealing with different industries, different cohorts,
Mhm.
size of clients, or the adoption framework may not change that much with different personas and different industries. So a lot of times, yeah, that's not uncommon for you to come up with the way that you're, especially when you map the outcomes. I always
Mhm.
recommend we have three different methodologies and visuals of how we present different outcomes, especially if like you're a business intelligence solution, you're going to work with different
Yeah.
teams. And so I always encourage them to actually create different visuals depending on the persona or the industry or the process that they're optimizing.
Mhm.
An example, when I worked with SAP, the Success Factors team, that's a HR big enterprise solution for HR. They had a big model for assessing employee performance, for
Mhm.
hiring employees. And every one of them, if you work with a big company, might have a different persona that you implement this
Yeah.
for. And lo and behold, they might just do one or two of them when they just implement. And now you need to talk to them about all these other categories or processes that you can do. And that would be like a different stakeholder within that bank or that big operation. You might have one that kind of showcases all the things that you can do. And you would talk about that to the global head of HR. And then you will be introduced to the head of that particular practice or process. And you would have double click version of that so that they can understand all the different modules and processes. You can help them with that specific practice. And so
Right.
absolutely you need to personalize it.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I just want to say every company, in order to be successful in customer success, they need an engine, meaning people that actually implement strategies and frameworks and getting things better. But they also need the framework and the methodologies and best practices. And I feel like sometimes people just read a blog and they think they understand it. But if they want to elevate that, they need to seek out coaches like you and me to help
Yeah.
them with that journey and help them understand best practices and how things roll so that they can accelerate the process and do it properly with less risks, meaning
Mhm.
they just hit it properly as soon as they try it versus, having a lot of difficulties and time until they get it right. So if anybody here actually wants to work with somebody that has those frameworks and can teach them best practices and can accelerate that process for them, and they're curious about the adoption framework, seek me out and see, maybe I can help. Worth a conversation. So hopefully anybody that's listening here, if you need that help, please contact and let's see if that makes sense.